The courtroom felt like it was holding its breath. Not a sound, not a single cough, not even the shuffle of feet dared disturb the air. Every chair was filled, every pair of eyes locked forward. It wasn't just a trial, it was a reckoning. At the center of it all sat Kody Brown. He looked different today. The man who had once walked with swagger, whose thunderous voice had commanded spaces, now appeared, trapped. His hair was slicked back, but stray locks clung to his forehead, wet with sweat. His jaw was set so hard you could almost hear the click of his teeth grinding. His fingers tapped against the glossy wood of the defense table. Tap, 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 a restive beat that belied the tempest raging within him. Before him sat the women who had once shared his life: Christine, Janelle, and Meri. No longer wives, no longer friends. Now they sat together, bound by something greater than their disagreements. Their faces spoke 1,000 tales. Christine's jaw was clenched, her eyes burning with resolve. Janelle was leaning forward slightly, serene but unwavering, her hand on the table as if balancing for whatever lay ahead. And Meri, her lips were white, her mouth drawn into a stern line. She was not angry. She was shattered. The judge tugged at his glasses, his face set in a stern line as he gazed out at the courtroom. "Order," he ordered, though already there was nothing but silence. "Bring the witness in." The thick doors groaned open. All heads turned. The sound of heels clicking shook the room like gunfire. And then she walked in. Robyn Brown. She moved slowly, holding her purse close to her chest as one would a shield. Her eyes frantically darted from the audience to the women, to Kody. Her feet stumbled when their gazes met. His stare was piercing, a threat etched in flames. Nevertheless, she continued walking. The bailiff led her to the witness stand. She sat down on the wooden chair, her hands shaking as they clutched the sides. Her breathing was in short gasps. The court reporter, who sat just below, adjusted her machine, prepared to capture every word. The judge leaned forward. His voice was steady but authoritative. "Mrs. Brown," he said, "you are sworn under oath. You are required to tell the truth." The room held its breath. Robyn's mouth opened, but nothing emerged. Her throat closed over. She swallowed thickly, her gaze going down to the table in front of her. The silence pulled and was drawn out agonizingly, long enough for murmurs to rise in the gallery. At last, her voice barely above a whisper, she managed to say, "I never wanted to be here." Her words trembled through the air, barely audible but heavy enough to land like stones in the hearts of everyone listening. Christine shifted in her seat, her eyes narrowing. Janelle tilted her head, watching carefully. Meri's fingers tightened around the edge of her chair. Robyn's hand shook harder as she took a deep, uneven breath. But the truth can't stay hidden anymore. A ripple of gasps moved through the room. Reporters rushed to jot down notes, pens moving wildly across page. A flash from an outside camera illuminated the hallway. For one quick moment, Kody's response was immediate. He strained forward, his face twisted in rage. His voice, low and poisonous, sliced through the charged air. "Robyn," he spat, his teeth almost together. "Don't you dare. Silence in my courtroom." The judge bellowed, slapping the gavel against the bench so violently the sound split like thunder. The room jumped collectively. Even Kody jumped, his scowl never wavering from Robyn. Her chest rose and fell in rapid, trembling d-dot. For a moment it looked like she was going to collapse altogether. But then, slowly, her eyes moved from the table, and rested not on Kody, but on the women across the room. Christine, Janelle, Meri's her voice trembled, but it didn't break. "Years," she said. "I kept secrets. I told myself I was shielding my family, shielding Kody, but the reality is, those secrets were killing all of us." The words strike like a hammer. Christine's eyes widened, her mouth falling slightly open. She looked at Robyn as if she had just confirmed the very suspicions she'd carried for years. Janelle inhaled sharply, her hand instinctively reaching for Christine's, squeezing it tight in shared understanding. And Meri? Meri's face went pale, her eyes glassy. She didn't look surprised. She looked as if she had already known, and dreaded hearing it aloud. The judge arched an eyebrow. "Proceed, Mrs. Brown." Again, Robyn stumbled. Her lips quivered, her body stiff as if torn between two impossible decisions: duty or honesty. Kody slammed his fist on the defense table, the sound ringing out. "Absurd," he bellowed. His voice cracked with desperation. "She's upset. She doesn't know what she's doing." The gavel fell again. "Mr. Brown, another outburst and I will find you in contempt. Do you understand?" Kody's nostrils quivered, but he subsided, his fists clasped so tightly on the arms of his chair that his knuckles became white. Robyn winced at the sound, but when her eyes came up again, there was something in them besides fear. Something else. Resolve. "I figured if I kept my mouth shut," she told him, her voice rising, "things would improve. I figured if I lied for him, if I buried the truth, this family could make it." Her voice trembled, and she put her shaking hand over her heart. "But it didn't make it. It was smashed. And I helped him smash it." A murmur of low tones came from the crowd. Reporters glared at each other, with wide eyes. A cough broke through the quiet, sharp and sudden. Christine pushed forward, speaking in a whisper, but one that burned with anger. "I knew it," she spat. "I knew there was something more." Janelle's gaze returned to Robyn. "What did he get you to cover up?" she whispered, but not quietly enough for the judge to reprimand her. Robyn's eyes filled with tears. She looked again at Kody. He shook his head very slightly, his lips frowning in a silent instruction. "Don't." But this time Robyn didn't flinch. She brushed at her tears with a shaking hand, put her back straight, and breathed softly. "Everything." The word hung there, solid and stifling. The judge scribbled a note on his pad. The bailiff shifted uncomfortably by the wall. The tension in the room was unbearable. Every person inside knew they were standing at the edge of something explosive. Kody shifted again, his voice lower now, almost pleading. "Robyn, think about what you're doing. Think about the kids. Think about us." Her head swiveled slowly, her eyes fastening on him. For the first time since she'd walked into the courtroom, her face went hard. The tears remained, but behind them was something else: sternness. "No, Kody," she stated firmly. "I've considered the kids. I've considered this family. I've considered everything. And the thing is, you left me no other option." The crowd gasped once more loudly this time. The judge rapped his gavel, demanding silence. Christine murmured something to Janelle, who nodded firmly. Meri shook, her hands shaking as she felt for a tissue, wiping at the corner of her eye. And Robyn. Robyn clutched the sides of the stand more tightly, her knuckles pale, her voice firm now. "Years I have lived in fear of what would become of me if I spoke. Today I'm tired of being afraid." They hung in the air, and so too did the hush in the courtroom become something else. A silence that was not hollow, but electric. It was the silence before the storm. The courtroom continued to vibrate with the ring of Robyn's words. The significance of her admission, her matter-of-fact statement that she had withheld things, lurked in the air like a thunderhead. No one was willing to breathe too hard, lest they miss the next thing to come out of her mouth. Robyn remained tense on the witness stand, her hands clasped together so tightly her knuckles whitened. She continued to gaze down at her hands, as if they were the solution she had been trying to escape for years. A piece of dark hair had come undone from her bun, and was caressing her cheek, but she did not take her hands from her face to push it away. Her form appeared to be locked, suspended between the woman she used to be, and the woman she was trying to become in this instant. The judge pushed his glasses up his nose, and cleared his throat. His voice softened a bit, but the firmness was still there. "Mrs. Brown, you are sworn in. You've already started to testify. Now I want you to keep going. The court needs your testimony." Robyn swallowed hard, her throat visibly constricting. She lifted her head, her eyes scanning the courtroom slowly. Her eyes brushed against Christine, Janelle, and Meri. Their faces, which had once been warm and familiar to her, now etched with suspicion, hurt, and expectation. She could practically feel the warmth of their eyes burning into her skin, demanding that she speak, or remain silent. And then reluctantly, Her gaze strayed to Kody. He was staring at her with the hawk gaze of a man ready to pounce. His frame tense and wound with pent-up fury. His lips were pursed so tightly they appeared pale, but those piercing, authoritative eyes blazed with rage. It was the same expression he'd thrown her hundreds of times in seclusion when she didn't want to comply. The same expression that had kept her mute time and again. And for a moment, she nearly gave in. Her mouth opened, but no sound escaped. She shivered. Recollections forced themselves back. Midnight-long whispers of commands. Documents pushed into her palms. Cautions whispered in the shadows. If you say something, you'll ruin us. Do you want that on your conscience, Robyn? Do you want to be the cause of this family's disintegration? Her breathing accelerated. She could sense the snare of those memories closing in around her chest like a vice. Mrs. Brown, the judge urged, raising his eyebrows. Would you like a moment to compose yourself? Robyn opened her mouth, shut it, and then shook her head weakly. No, no, I. She froze again. The mere sound of her own voice seemed to betray her, weak and uncertain. From the defense table, Kody leaned forward. His voice was low, but the venom in it had weight. Robyn, he hissed softly. Don't you dare say another word. Her head jerked toward him, her eyes wide. The fear was there in her face, raw and unguarded. The judge's gavel cracked down on the block, the sharp crack slicing through the air. Mr. Brown, the judge snapped. You will be silent unless you are addressed. Do you know what I'm saying? Kody set his jaw. For an instant he seemed on the verge of protest, but then he relaxed back in his chair, holding the armrests until his knuckles were white. Robyn's breathing was jagged now. Her hands trembled as she thrust them against the wooden edges of the stand. She faltered, her voice breaking down. The gallery shifted. Somebody coughed. Pressmen leaned forward over their notepads, their pens at the ready like weapons prepared to seize the moment history turned. Christine couldn't help herself anymore. She leaned forward a fraction, her voice biting and accusatory even though she was barely above a whisper. Tell the truth, Robyn. Tell the truth once in your life. The words cut through the room. Robyn's face contorted. Tears welled up in her eyes and dripped down her cheeks. She brushed them away hastily, almost furiously, as if guilty of her own vulnerability. She glanced at Christine, then at Janelle, then at Meri, and back at Kody. I told myself I was keeping my family safe, she explained, her voice shaking. I told myself I was keeping him safe. She raised a trembling hand and gestured in Kody's direction, but she couldn't bring herself to actually look at him. But the reality is, every lie I told was killing us, bit by bit. The words landed in the courtroom like a bomb. A murmur ran through the crowd. Christine's jaw went slack, her eyes bulging as if her worst fears had just been realized. Janelle gave an audible gasp, her hand clenching around Christine's arm. And Meri hung her head, tears creeping silently down her face. The judge reclined in his chair, narrowing his eyes at Robyn. Mrs. Brown, are you telling me that you deliberately withheld information, that you were involved in the cover-up of things that relate to this case? Her lips quivered. She paused for a second time, the silence hanging heavy. Kody pounded his fist on the table. She doesn't have a clue what she's saying, he bellowed, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. She's mixed up, she's upset. Enough. The judge hammered, pounding the gavel so hard the sound echoed off the wood-paneled walls. One more outburst, Mr. Brown, and I will have you thrown out of this courtroom. The tension that followed was suffocating. Robyn's fingers twisted in each other, her nails sinking into her flesh, until her knuckles throbbed. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to dissolve into the wood of the chair, to flee from the room, to reverse every step that had led her here. But then she remembered something. She remembered the children, their children. The way they looked at her with confusion when fights erupted in the house. The way they overheard whispers they weren't meant to hear. The way their laughter had grown quieter as the years went by. And she remembered the other women. Christine's quiet resilience. Janelle's calm strength. Meri's loneliness that hung around her like a shadow. For years she'd convinced herself she was saving them all by harboring Kody's secrets. But had she actually saved anyone, or just become his partner in their misery? Her chest heaved up and down, her heart thudding in her ears. And then, oh so slowly, she raised her chin. Her red-rimmed, tear-drenched eyes hardened with a glimmer of determination. Her voice, still shaking, bore a new weight. Yeah, she replied. I held secrets. I concealed things. Because Kody said to. Because I was too scared not to. The courtroom collectively gasped. Christine slammed her hand on the table, her face twisted in anger. At last, she spat. At last, you confess. Janelle leaned forward, her voice urgently hushed to Christine, but her eyes never shifting from Robyn. Meri covered her mouth with both hands, her shoulders shaking as silent sobs racked her body. Kody shot to his feet, his face beet red, veins bulging in his neck. You're lying, he bellowed, pointing a trembling finger at Robyn. You ungrateful. But his words were drowned out by the gavel, the judge's voice thundering above the chaos. Order! Order! This courtroom will remain in order. Robyn sat there, shaking, tears streaming down her face, but did not turn away this time. She gazed straight ahead, her voice cracking as she said the words she could no longer keep inside. Years I believed that silence was love, but silence was venom, and I can no longer be silent. The courtroom held its breath. Not a single whisper, not a single sound, only the rumble of truth suspended in the air. And with them, Robyn Brown dispelled the fantasy that had bound the family together for years. The air in the courtroom was charged. Robyn's final words still hung there. For years I thought silence was love, but silence was poison. And I can't be silent anymore. The crowd shifted forward in their chairs. Reporters' pencils scribbled frantically, recording each shaking syllable. The judge's gavel lay solidly in his palm, prepared to fall again at the slightest indication of disorder. But silence deafeningly loud was that of Kody Brown. He sat rigid in his chair, his fists so tightly clenched, his knuckles were white, his eyes blazed into Robyn, like daggers, his jaw clenched so tightly it seemed like stone. He was a man accustomed to control, accustomed to obedience. But for the moment, he was losing both. Robyn shifted on the stand, her voice shaking as she went on. You all believe you have an idea what destroyed this family. But you don't. You've only witnessed the arguments, the insults, the estrangement. You have not witnessed the deceit beneath it all. The courtroom exploded in murmurs. Christine's face contorted, anger and outrage dancing in her eyes. Janelle hunched forward, her gaze fixed on Robyn, begging to hear every utterance. Meri shook her head, her face bleak, as if she already knew the truth, but hoped she was mistaken. The judge raised a hand. Mrs. Brown, could you be specific? What are the lies you're talking about? Robyn swallowed hard, her throat constricting. She clutched the sides of the witness stand, as if it were all that stood between her and falling. And then, with a voice that was both shattered and courageous, she spoke. Kody made me hide money. He made me hide records. And he made me lie to the women sitting right there. Gasps erupted throughout the room. The words hit like lightning, impossible to escape. Christine leapt to her feet before her lawyer could restrain her. I knew it, she exclaimed, jabbing a shaking finger at Kody. You said we were crazy, that we were paranoid. But we were right the whole time. Mrs. Brown, the judge thundered, his gavel coming down with a bang. Sit down or you will be escorted out. Christine leaned back in her chair, but her gaze never wavered from Robyn. Her eyes blazed with a fire that had lain dormant for years. Robyn's voice quavered as she continued. I didn't want to. I pleaded with him not to make me the middleman. But he told me that if I loved him, if I wanted our family to live, I had to do it. So I did. I hid the bank documents. I lied regarding the house titles. I signed something I didn't know because he said so. Kody had finally reached his breaking point. He jumped to his feet, pounding his fist on the table so hard that the wood shook. That's a lie, he bellowed, his voice ringing through the courtroom. She's distorting everything. She's just jealous because she enough. The judge bellowed, pounding his gavel. Mr. Brown, one more outburst and you will be removed from this courtroom. The crowd was in an uproar. Some yelled, others hissed. The reporters wrote feverishly, recording every phrase. Robyn winced at Kody's outburst, her frame shaking, but for the first time she didn't step back. Instead, she stood front and center, her face streamed with tears, and demanded, Stop playing games, Kody. You know it's true. Kody's face flushed with anger, his eyes feral, but he didn't react. He simply stood there, chest pumping, before gradually subsiding into his seat. The judge's eyes narrowed. Mrs. Brown, you're saying you have proof of these allegations? Robyn faltered. Her hands shook furiously, her breathing coming in strained gasps. They all leaned in closer. The air was thick with tension. And then, she nodded. Christine's mouth dropped open. Janelle's gasp was loud. Meri gripped the armrest. I brought proof, Robyn whispered. The courtroom erupted into noise. Yells, gasps, the sound of rushing feet as people strained their necks to get a glimpse. The judge hammered his gavel again and again.
Order.
Order! Order! Robyn slowly slid her hand into her purse. The hiss of the zipper opening sliced through the din like a knife. Her fingers shook with convulsive spasms as she produced a small, sealed envelope. She clutched it close, looking down at it as if it was an anvil. Kody went white, his lips parted, his breathing harsh. No, he breathed softly. Robyn, don't you dare. Her tears fell onto the envelope. She gazed up at him, her voice cracking. I'm sorry, Kody, I can't protect you anymore. She handed her hand over, passing the envelope to the bailiff. Gasps were heard throughout the room as the bailiff took it to the judge. Every step seemed to take forever. Kody leaped forward to do something to prevent it, but his lawyer caught his arm and restrained him. He sat down hard, his chest struggling like a cage animal. The judge unsealed and opened the papers within. His gaze swept the pages, his face darkening line by line, his lips compressed into a thin, grim line. The courtroom was silent now. Even Christine, Janelle, and Meri were seated motionless, their eyes fixed on the judge. Minutes felt like hours. And at last, the judge looked up. These papers, he announced, his voice serious, seemed to substantiate Mrs. Brown's story. The courtroom was in chaos. Christine banged her hand down on the table. I knew it, she exclaimed, her voice trembling with rage. All those years, all the battles. It wasn't us, it was him. Janelle rested her head in her hands, crying uncontrollably. All the stress, all the uncertainty. He made us doubt ourselves. Meri whispered softly under her breath, so that only someone very close could hear. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't want to see it. Red-faced and trembling, Kody yelled over the din. You don't understand. None of you understand why I did it. Quiet, the judge thundered. His gavel came down so hard on the block that the sound vibrated in everyone's ears. This court will come to order immediately. The commotion gradually subsided. Robyn sat on the stand, weeping silently into her hands. She seemed exhausted, as if the burden of years had finally spilled onto her shoulders. The judge piled the papers in order and placed them aside. His tone was frigid, unequivocal. This evidence will be entered into record, and I promise you it will have repercussions. The words hung heavy, absolute. Christine faced Kody, speaking her words with a sharp, unforgiving tone. You destroyed us, Kody, and now everybody knows it. Kody shot back at her, eyes wild, chest heaving in ragged bursts. But words did not leave his mouth. The subsequent silence was no longer the same. It was not the silence of expectation. It was the silence of a truth laid bare, and the start of a reckoning no one could halt. The courtroom was held motionless in time. The judge's words hung suspended in the air. This evidence will be entered into record, and I assure you it will have consequences. Everyone's gaze focused on the thick pile of papers, now resting on the judge's desk. That ripped open envelope moments before had knocked everyone off balance. Kody sat rigid, white-faced, his jaw shaking with anger that would not be held back. Next to him, his lawyer spoke in hushed tones of urgency, telling him to remain calm. But it was evident that Kody was struggling every moment not to blow up once more. Robyn, still sitting on the witness stand, had her face buried in her hands. She was weeping quietly, but her tears were no longer tears of remorse. Her tears were tears of a person who had finally let go of a secret that was too burdensome to carry. Christine, Janelle, and Meri sat frozen, their faces forward as they waited for the truth they had long been denied to finally be revealed. The judge pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose and scanned the room. He spoke low, steady, but with an undertone of authority. These reports, he started, spell out money transactions, secret accounts, and deeds on property that were concealed from central members of this family.
Gasps reverberated through the courtroom like thunder. Christine pounded her fist on the table. I knew it. I knew something was being concealed from us. Janelle's lips quivered, her eyes wide with shock. So all those years, all those arguments over money. It wasn't us. It was him. Meri's face went white, her voice barely above a whisper. All the nights I cried, thinking I wasn't good enough. And all along, the truth was being hidden. The judge held up one page. As seen here, Mr. Brown deposited significant amounts of money into a private account in Mrs. Robyn Brown's name. Money intended to benefit all the wives and children was channeled elsewhere. Robyn's head flew back, her eyes opening wide. I didn't even know. I signed whatever he told me to sign. I thought it was for all of us. Kody finally blew his top. He sprang to his feet, shaking a finger in Robyn's face. Liar, you knew precisely what you were doing. You were involved too. Order, bellowed the judge, pounding his gavel down. The wood splintered under the blow. Sit down at once, Mr. Brown. Breathlessly and flushed, Kody slowly sank back into his seat, but his eyes blazed with anger. The judge went on. These files also contain deeds properties Mr. Brown bought in hiding. Some were put in Robyn's name. Some were concealed in shell companies. But one fact is particularly prominent. The judge turned to another page, his face darkening. Several properties were bought just before your son's death. Garrison Brown. The room was left in stunned silence. Christine's breath was stuck in her throat. Janelle's hand leapt to her lips. Meri shut her eyes hard, as if preparing to crash. The judge's tone was serious. Money that could have gone for therapy, schooling, or even for life-saving treatment went into these accounts instead. While your son was struggling, while your family was tearing apart, money was being stashed. Christine broke down into tears. She slammed her hand on the table, tears running down her face. He was crying out for help. He was drowning, and you were stashing money. You killed him. Kody slammed his hand on the table. Don't even try to put that on me. Don't even try. But his words were overpowered by the screams of Christine and Janelle. Janelle stood up, shaking her finger at Kody. You said there was no money for Garrison to leave. No money for his medical expenses. No money for him for the future. And all along, you were saving it for yourself. Meri's voice cracked, deep and thick with sorrow. He might be here today, if we had only provided him with the aid he required. But you opted for greed. The courtroom erupted into chaos. The public was stunned, their mouths agape, other heads shaking. Reporters frantically wrote, aware they were seeing history. The judge smacked his gavel once more. Order! If this courtroom does not order, I will clear the gallery. Gradually the commotion died down. Christine sat shaking, her face streaming with tears. Janelle sunk back into her chair, her body shuddering uncontrollably. Meri was blank, shattered. Robyn's weeping reverberated through the silence. She finally lifted her head, looking Kody directly in the eyes with eyes of anguish. Yelling, you said we had to safeguard ourselves, she whispered. You said that if the other wives found out, they'd abandon us. But it wasn't about keeping us safe, was it? It was about keeping you safe. Kody scowled at her, his expression contorted in anger. You think you're guiltless. You were the one whom they trusted the least. And now you deceive me in front of all these people. Robyn's voice trembled, but her words were painful. I remained silent for you. I lied for you. And what did it cost us? A son, a family, everything. The courtroom was choking with emotion. The judge put down the papers with finality. His voice was firm, authoritative. Mr. Brown, the evidence is overwhelming. These actions not only shattered your family, but may also have legal repercussions outside of this courtroom. Christine's attorney stood. Your Honor, we ask that these documents be formally presented as exhibits, and that an independent inquiry into Mr. Brown's financial impropriety be commenced. The judge nodded. So ordered. The bailiff took the envelope and added it to evidence. The snapping of the folder closed sounded like the thud of a coffin lid. Kody's face burned red, sweat running down his temples. He glanced around the courtroom at Christine's anger, Janelle's heartbreak, Meri's sadness, and Robyn's shadow. For the first time he seemed small. And then, almost inaudibly, he said, "You don't understand. I did it for us. I did it for the family." Christine glared at him with sheer venom. "You didn't do it for us. You did it for yourself. And now the entire world knows who you truly are." The courtroom fell silent once again. The envelope had performed its task. It had torn the veil asunder and unveiled the secrets that Kody believed would be forever hidden. And while the trial was not yet done, one thing was certain: Kody Brown's kingdom had fallen, and nothing would ever be the same again. The courtroom fell silent. The air hung thick and heavy with grief and anger. The envelope had already exploded like a bomb, revealing Kody's deceit, his avarice, and his treachery. Now came the time everyone waited for. The verdict. The judge leaned forward, his fingers intertwined. His voice was even, but the force of his words bore down on all present. "This case is one of a kind. It's not just about money, but about trust, betrayal, and the shattering disintegration of a family. The papers presented confirm a cycle of deceit and mismanagement. But above the law, there is a moral obligation that cannot be glossed over."
Christine was seated upright, her hands shaking, her eyes locked on the judge. Janelle held her breath, gripping the edge of the table until her knuckles turned white. Meri sat motionless, her expression unreadable, but her eyes glistened with unshed tears. Robyn looked shattered, her mascara streaked, clutching a crumpled tissue. And Kody, he sat slumped in his chair, glaring at no one. His once fiery arrogance drained into a hollow shell of desperation. The judge went on. "Mr. Brown, your conduct stole resources from your family, brought emotional damage, and contributed to the irreparable dissolution of your home. Though the court can't reverse tragedy, it can serve justice." The gallery leaned forward, fronting in anticipation. Reporters' pens scribbled vehemently across paper. Cameras snapped. The world held its breath. The judge's gavel came down once. "This court finds you, Kody Brown, guilty of financial misconduct and fraudulent concealment of assets. These are not only civil violations, but may have criminal consequences. A separate investigation will continue." The room was filled with gasps. Kody's attorney jumped to his feet. "Your Honor, I must object." "Sit down, counselor." The judge growled. "Your client has lied long enough. The evidence is irrefutable." Kody pounded his fists on the table. "This is a witch hunt. They're all against me. My family betrayed me because they're jealous. You don't know what it's like to have the burden I had." Christine leapt to her feet, her fingers shaking with anger. "You didn't bear us, Kody. You buried us. You buried your son under your lies and your selfishness." Janelle came over, sobbing. "You let Garrison get away from you because you were too busy creating an empire for yourself." Meri's voice was husky, but as sharp as broken glass. "You don't get to be the victim, Kody. Not anymore." The judge brought his gavel down so hard the crack of it ran through the air. "Order!" The room went silent. The judge's gaze was icy as he held it on Kody. "You talk of weight, Mr. Brown. The real weight was carried by the ones who believed in you, by the wives who did without, by the children who were shortchanged, and most of all by the son who isn't here anymore. That is the weight you will carry, to eternity." Kody stood there, frozen, his jaw wide open, but nothing was said. For once Kody was at a loss for words. The judge's demeanor softened, but his authority did not waver. "And as for this family, Christine, Janelle, Meri, and Robyn, the truth is no longer secret. How you treat this truth will determine what is left of your lives. But this court will not permit these deceptions to continue any longer." He raised his gavel for one last time. "The verdict is final. The case is closed." Bang! The gavel crashed down, and with it the courtroom erupts into pandemonium. Christine buried her face in her hands, crying hysterically. Janelle put an arm around her and wept also. Meri remained motionless, but her tears overflowed at last, silent streams of anguish. Robyn slowly turned her face to Kody, her voice shaking. "I thought I was keeping us safe. I thought you loved me. But the whole time you were looking out for yourself. You wrecked us all." Kody confronted her, his eyes bloodshot, his voice low and barely audible. You were supposed to stay with me. You were supposed to belong to me. Robyn shook her head. Not anymore. The bailiffs closed in, gripping a tight arm across Kody's shoulder. He winced, brusquely shrugging free, but didn't fight. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the boss. Christine's wails reached a crescendo. She whimpered into her hands. Garrison, we did it, baby, the truth is out. He can't hurt us anymore. The gallery erupted. Reporters dashing out to put the story on paper. Whispers filling every corner of the room. But within the family's corner, there was silence that was heavy. Janelle broke her silence. Her voice shattered. We might have justice, but it won't bring him back. Meri slowly nodded. No, but perhaps it will prevent another child from being broken like our own was. Christine raised her head, her face flushed and tear-wet from grief. She stared directly at Kody, who was being escorted towards the door. You'll carry this around for the rest of your life, she said unemotionally. Every evening, every morning, every time you try to sleep, you'll see his face. And remember that you preferred yourself to your own son. Kody remained silent. His head was bowed, his body hunched as bailiffs led him away. His empire, his authority, his family, all lost. The judge rose from the bench. The courtroom emptied out, but the reverberations lingered. For Janelle, Meri, and Christine, it wasn't victory, but survival. For Robyn, it was the destruction of each illusion she had held dear. And for Kody, it was the start of a solitary fall into shame. The final picture lingered. The bashed gavel, the shattered family, and the haunting reality that no verdict could ever mend. Garrison was gone, and never would anything return him.